We are continuing with the storyline of Abraham. The last we saw, Abraham had sent his servant. I'm on page 121, chapter 25, in the stone edition of the Art Scroll Torah. Yeah, we should get licensing. We should get like advertising.
We should get
fees.
royalties.
That was the word I was looking for mentioning Art Scroll.
Ezra will write up the contract for you.
Write the contract. We should definitely get a percentage for any web solution that comes as a result. All right. The last we saw, Abraham had sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac, and his servant found Rivka, and he brought her back, and we spoke about that last week. The story continues. Abraham proceeded and took a wife whose name was Keturah. Just remember, Abraham's first wife, Sarah, has passed away, and he, older man, the Torah tells us that it's not good for a man to be alone. We spoke about that prior. We're not going to speak about that again tonight, but if anyone's interested, you should go listen to my talk on that. It is not good for man to be alone. And Abraham goes and he takes a wife. And he takes a wife whose name was Keturah. And she bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Nice names. Now Yokshan begat Sheba and Didan, and the children of Didan were Ashurim, Letushim, Leumim, and the children of Midian were Epha and Epher, Hanoch, Abida, and Elda. These were the descendants of Keturah. Just listing Abraham's lineage here. Then it goes and says, and Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. But to the concubine children who were Abraham's, the children of Keturah, Abraham gave gifts, and he sent them away from Isaac his son while he was still alive, eastward to the land of the east. You know, if you read this story, it's a little problematic because it says explicitly, Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. Now, if you just read that line, reading comprehension, just taking things at their face value, literally, it says Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. So what does he have left? Nothing. So he's given everything to Isaac. So then how do you understand the very next verse, the very next sentence that says, but to the concubine children who were Abraham's, Abraham gave gifts, and then he sent them away. He has nothing left to give. What gifts is he giving them? So, we're going to speak a little bit about what exactly Abraham had left to give and what did he give to Isaac. So, on the very first level, it says Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. And that is literal. Abraham gave everything to Isaac. There was no doubt about anything that he owned. It was all Isaac's. Not only everything he owned, but the blessings, the inheritance, the baton to carry on the mission that was given to Abraham, the mission of building this nation, building a people that stood for meaning and morality, that was handed over to Isaac. And Isaac was going to carry that mantle. And all of Abraham's possessions, all of his wealth, and Abraham had amassed a massive amount of wealth. He was an extremely wealthy person. Perhaps not as wealthy as Jay-Z now, but he was definitely wealthy. First hip-hop billionaire. And he was incredibly wealthy, and he gave it all to Isaac. So what does he have left to give to these sons of Keturah? So the only thing that he cannot give away, no matter what you give, you can never give away what you know. That you can't give away. If I own a possession, I can give you the possession is now yours, it's no longer mine. But the one thing I cannot give away, and it can never become entirely Isaac's, is what I know. I can share with you what I know. But it's still mine, I still own it. You now own it as well. Hopefully. Hopefully you've taken it and you own it as well. And that's why it's a gift. And that is what Abraham still had remaining in his possession. After he gave over everything to Isaac, the one thing he still had remaining was his understanding of the world and his understanding of life. And this, by the way, gentlemen, I've shared this with you. There is nothing new under the sun. KABALLISTIC. King Solomon said it. King Solomon said, Ein chadash tachas hashemesh, nothing new under the sun. Everything and anything, if you want to know its source, it is in the Jewish Bible. It is in the Torah. And the one thing that is also in the Torah is the very thing that the world is fascinated with. The very thing that the world is fascinated with, and what is that? The Far East. The insights and that magical understanding that seems to be so alluring that they have in the Far East. People are fascinated by it. You know, you talk about religion and you talk about people, you know, you should go learn some Judaism. You should learn about your heritage. You should learn about your culture. You should learn about your religion. Archaic. Ancient, archaic, meaningless, has no relevance to my life. Oh, but feng shui. Oh, that's something I want to know about. Feng shui. What the Orientals say, I should put my bed this way, not that way. Because that will bring blessings to my house. And I should put pots and pans and things hanging on the wall because that will bring tranquility to my home. Because that's what the Orientals say. But why isn't that archaic? No, that's not archaic. That's classical. that's ancient wisdom. Oh, for them it's ancient wisdom, but for us it's archaic. You don't think people say this? People say this all the time. And guess what Judaism says? You don't want to know where they got that stuff? That feng shui? And the ability with your finger to break a bone? That stuff's real. You can think what you want, but that stuff's real. Let me see any single one of you. I don't know. You know what? That truth is, I don't know what any of you know. Maybe some of you do know. but I'm willing to bet that most of you don't know how to put 5 bricks on top of 2 slats and shove your hand through them. But yet they can do it. You can't say there's nothing to it. It's not just muscle. Because I guarantee you, go to Gold's Gym and they can't do it. They'll punch that brick and have broken fingers. But some little Oriental guy can walk up and go, and it all breaks. Where do you think they got it from? You want to know where they got it from? Right here. Abraham gave gifts to these children and sent them where? To the east. Well, where are they?
Asia.
Well, they're in Baghdad, they're in Iraq. So we call it the Mideast. If you live there, you think you call it the Mideast? Because we're so arrogant. We are so arrogant, the Western world. We think we got it all figured. We are the center of the universe. You know, West, East, and Far East, Mideast. It's all depending on where you're standing.
Yeah.
It's a globe. It's circular. And you can start at any point and say, well, this is east of, you know, we're in the east. If you're talking to someone from Hawaii. We're in the east. No, we're in the west. So Abraham is right smack in what we call the Mideast. Well, if he sends people from the Mideast to the east, where's he sending them to?
Asia.
To the Far East.
Asia.
To Asia.
India.
What he gave them, and our commentaries say this, is he gave them the deeper understandings of black magic, of how to manipulate the physical world. I touched on this last week, I think, when we spoke about Lag BaOmer. I think I touched on it for a little bit. I said we were going to get into it. Or was that 2 weeks ago? I've lost track of time. You know, people are fascinated, especially out here in LA. Out here in LA, ooh, Kabbalah. Thankfully, it's not as hot as it used to be, but 20 years ago when I first moved out here, oh my gosh, was it a buzz. Because you had famous people all wrapped up into it. So everyone was like, ooh. You know, now you mention these famous people. They're old and decrepit. You know? Like, but Madonna was like, oh, Kabbalah. So everyone was like, oh, I got to learn Kabbalah. And so everyone was all into Kabbalah. I remember the first time I moved out here, I gotta get myself in trouble again. But the first time I moved out here, I went and I called up a student that I knew from Israel. And I figured I'd reach out, went out to have coffee with him, and I wanted to get him into learning. Let's sit down, let's learn some Judaism, let's learn some Torah, let's learn what Judaism says about life. That's all that learning is, understanding life. And he said, Rabbi, I don't need to. But please enlighten me. Why don't they? Who doesn't need to learn about life? He says, Rabbi, I don't need to. I said, why? And he reached into his pocket and he grabbed his wallet. He took out his wallet. And from his wallet, he took out a business card sized card that was laminated. And on one side of it was the Hebrew letters Aleph Base, all the Hebrew letters. And on the other side was in microscopic film, like printing. It was too small to read, but was a Kabbalistic book. On the other side, just printed. It was too small to read. You'd need a magnifying glass 10 times the power of a normal magnifying glass to be able to read it. And he said, all I have to do is take this out once a day and look at it. And that's all and I'm connected to my soul. And I realized at that moment I was talking to a totem pole. I was talking to a tree. You have to take that out and look at it. People are fascinated by Kabbalah. And you want to know what I'm telling you the fascination was and perhaps still is when you talk about, let's learn some spirituality.
But that's not Kabbalah, is it?
No.
Yes and no. Yes and no. See, people think, and people want to think, that if they learn Kabbalah, if they learn the secrets of life, if they learn the intricacies of the universe, then you know what they'll be able to do? They'll be able to levitate, float a cat, be able to stand on the edge of a sword. That's what they think. Go watch some of these, kung fu movies of modern times. Not the old kung fu movies, the ones that were hysterical to watch that I grew up on, where the words didn't match the mouth. It was like the mouth kept moving after the words stopped. It was awesome. You go watch the newer ones where they jump up and they stand on the edge of a sword. Or they jump and they walk on trees and then jump to the next tree. And people are, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do that? And it must be that those martial art of yore were able to teach you how to do that. And the reality is maybe they could. Because the reality is yes. What is Kabbalah? Kabbalah is nothing other than the understanding of the physical world from a spiritual perspective. What is physics? Physics is understanding the molecular structure of anything physical. That's all physics is. And if you understand the molecular structure of anything in the physical world, you know what you can do? You can make an atomic bomb. You can split an atom and blow up a continent. Or maybe a city on a continent. You can split an atom and blow up half the world if you split enough. Because you understand the mechanics of it. That's what physics is. Well, Judaism says that there is something behind the atom itself. And that is the spiritual energy that exists. And if you can understand how that works, if you can understand how the spiritual energy manifests itself on a physical level, you know what you could do? You could levitate a cat. You could manipulate the physical world if you understood it on a deep, deep understanding. And that's why when you ask, is that Kabbalah? Yes, it is. Because if you really understood how the Hebrew letters work and the mechanics of the Hebrew letters and what they represent and the spiritual energy that each Hebrew letter embodies, then all you have to do is meditate on that, and you know what you do? You're connecting with the spiritual realities of the world. But to just take it out of your pocket and look at it and say, I've connected with my soul, you might as well walk up to a totem pole and say, I'm connecting with my soul. And for that matter, you might as well walk up to a fire hydrant. It's no different. But that is what wisdom is. Do you see, Judaism says, do you want to know what wisdom is? I've told you this many times. The starting point of wisdom is definitions. If you don't have definitions, you're just throwing words around. You can sound intellectual all you want, but you have no idea what you're talking about. And not only that, if you don't have definitions, it is inevitable that you will get into an argument with someone and not even realize that the two of you might even be saying the same thing. If you just stop to say, well, what are you saying? What do you mean? We throw this word wisdom around all the time. What is it? Wisdom is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. They are very different things. Knowledge is an understanding of any given subject. That's what knowledge is. An understanding of any given subject. You could be incredibly knowledgeable about website, what was it? SEO, about search engine analysis. Incredibly knowledgeable. That doesn't necessarily make you wise. And it doesn't make you knowledgeable about insects. And you could be incredibly knowledgeable about insects. That doesn't make you wise, but that doesn't mean that you're incredibly knowledgeable about sex. And you could be incredibly knowledgeable about sex, and that doesn't make you wise. And that doesn't mean that you're incredibly knowledgeable about women, just because you know about sex. I'm not going to go this next step, because if you're knowledgeable about women, and you actually are, then you probably are wise. Or you're fooling yourself. Knowledge is an understanding of any given subject. What's wisdom? Wisdom is a very specific type of knowledge. It's knowledge of life. Wisdom is when you have knowledge about life. And life is the existence of the world and the relationships therein. And therefore, if you have wisdom, ultimate wisdom, then you actually do have insights into the very nature of creation. Because that's part of life. And therefore, yes, you can learn how to levitate a cat. And Abraham had that understanding. And what did he do? He gave it to these children, and he sent it to the east. And therefore, it is no accident that all of this metaphysical, it's metaphysical, it's not physical. It is not a physical phenomena that they can break bricks. It is not a physical phenomena that they can break bones. It is a metaphysical phenomena. And it is no accident that they have this metaphysical understanding, because they were given it by Abraham.
Walk on hot coals.
Huh?
The walk on hot
Walk
coals.
on hot coals. All of it.
Why would Abraham give such a thing to these people?
Yeah.
I mean, like today, if somebody had that type of wisdom and was sitting here and was this big sage and Torah, genius like Avraham was, and imagine going to like the biggest rabbi of our generation, and some like punk from the Orient walks up to him and says,
Hey,
"Teach me
watch
how to break
this."
bricks. Here you go," and give it to him.
Yeah.
Even to somebody who's like really learned, they would say, "No, you have to learn." Be 80 years old, and you have to go through this and go through these steps,
70.
and then I'll give it to you, right?
Yeah. Two very different questions that you've asked. The first question you asked is, why did Abraham give it? The second question you asked is, why is it that we have such a reverence towards this information, where we say, no, you have to be a certain knowledge, a certain level of understanding before you explore into this, whereas someone else might not necessarily have that reverence and therefore can learn it much earlier. Two separate questions. The first question is really quite simple. And anyone here who's a father knows the simplicity of that question. Is that even though his true son, his one heir, is Isaac, and everything is going to Isaac, these are still his children. What's he going to do? Give him nothing? These are still his children. He's got to give him something. What's left to give him? His understanding of the world. He's not going to give him Torah understanding. He's not going to give him Jewish understanding because that's Isaac's. So what does he have left? This understanding of the mechanics of the world, that I can give. And that's what he gave. For that reason, these are my children. I have to give them something. In regards to the reverence, the reason for that is actually counterintuitive. The reason for that is, ironically, to deflate the reverence of this school of thought. Is to de-emphasize the power of this. I'll explain what I mean, and then we'll go on. If someone were to come to me, I would hope, or if someone were to come to any sage of Jewish wisdom, any Jewish scholar, and say that Jesus was able to walk on water, you know what the response would be? So what? Okay. So he could walk on water. Therefore what? Whoop-de-doo. If someone today came and said that they could do magic, you know what your response should be? That's pretty cool. But so what? Because what should impress you is not magic. What should impress you is wisdom. Not the hocus pocus. Share with you just very briefly because I want to go on to the next thing. We see this in the story of Moses. Everyone knows the story. Moses was told by God to go down to Egypt and take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And what does Moses say? Moses say, but how are they going to know that it's you that sent me? And so God says, very simple, I want you to do the following sign. You'll take your stick, you'll throw it on the ground, it'll become a snake. Okay? Take some water, turn it to blood. Moses walks into Pharaoh, takes his stick and throws it on the ground and it turns to a snake. And what does Pharaoh do?
Turns his own stick.
He calls in the school kids. Calls in the school kids. The kid, bring the kids in here. And he brings in the kids. And he says, kids, look what this Jew's doing. And they all giggle at him. And they throw the stick down and turn their sticks into snakes.
How did they do it?
Through the ankle.
Let me ask you the following question. And this is the power of the Torah. Seeing the beauty and the insights and the wisdom in the stories. Not just what you read on the surface. When you read that story, let's not talk about how they did it. We don't have the time for that tonight. But just taking the story at face value, whether it happened, it didn't happen, that's a whole separate discussion. Just from a literary analysis, purely literary, not even discussing is it true or not. Putting that aside. I always wonder, nobody ever asks when they read Harry Potter, well, how'd they do that? Messiah. And you are now my emissaries. This is our last supper. And I say, listen, I've been sent by the Almighty. And I want you all to go and start teaching people. And this is what I want you to do. And I'm going to send each and every one of you to an Ivy League university. And I want you to go to their physics and science department. Specifically, because that's where the smart Jews are. And I want you to go and tell them that I've sent you, and you're going to demonstrate it by doing a wonder. A wonder. And what do I tell you to do? Tell everyone that you're going to create fire. And they're like, what? Yep. They're going to say, let's see. And I want you to reach into your pocket and take out a lighter and go, fire. Exactly. I'm going to laugh at you. How in the world is that a sign? How in the world is that what God's telling the Jewish people? Moses says, how am I going to tell them that they're going to believe in me? And God says, oh, here you go. Tell them you'll make magic, you'll make fire, and you'll light a match. Because it's very simple. Very simple. If you are relying on the magic, then that magic better be something stupendous. But if you're not relying on the magic, but rather you're relying on the intellectual understanding first and foremost, then the magic doesn't need to be that stupendous. And I'll explain. When's the last time any of you went to the bank and tried to deposit a check that was too large for the teller? Never? Every now and
We all
then.
wish we have that problem.
Huh?
We
Every
all
now
wish
and
we had
then
that.
you go to the bank and you want to deposit a check and it's too large for the teller. And so what do they have to do? Call the manager over. And the manager comes over and it's inevitable. It's the funniest thing. You always wonder, really? This is your system? This is what you need to do? All the manager does is they come over and they take the check, they put it down, they type a bunch of buttons. I don't know what they're typing, but they're just probably an override. And then they take their pen and they scribble a little initial on the check. And then they deposit the check. Now, are they relying on that little scribble? Because imagine if you do the following. Imagine if you go to that same teller, you walk up to the teller, you take out your check, and you realize, oh shoot, it's larger than the than the amount. All right, and then you take the pen and you just do the little scribble, and you hand the check. She says, "Oh, this is over my limit. I need to call the manager." Oh no, the scribble's on there. What's she gonna say? I gotta call the manager. Because it's not the scribble. The manager comes over. And then the manager puts the little scribble. You see, Moses is going to show up. And he's going to say, God sent me. And you know what the Jewish people are going to say? Really? God sent you? Who's God? Which God? What do you know about God, Moses? Because there's lots of gods. You know, the Egyptians, they got their gods. And Moses is going to have to intellectually articulate how he can say for sure that he is sent by the God. And then after he intellectually explains to them, then he says, okay, now let me get your emotion into it. Now let me get your emotion into it. And he lights a match. Okay. They're not relying on the match. The Egyptians, they don't want to hear intellectual. They just want to be wowed. Wow me. Who's this God? Wow me. Show me something. That's the difference. You see, we push aside this Kabbalistic understanding. Why? Because first and foremost, we want people to understand there's an intellectual awareness that you need to have. There's an intellectual understanding of what life is and what life's about. And after you have that foundation, then you know what this other stuff is? This is now just icing on the cake. Otherwise, you flip it around and the icing becomes the meal. And it's ooh, and it's all about Madonna. That's why. We don't want it to be that. We want to push it aside. All right, let's go on. Abraham is now about to die. We are coming to the conclusion of Abraham's life. And now these are the days and the years of Abraham's life which he lived. 100 years, 70 years, and 5 years. And Abraham died, expired and died at a good old age, mature and content. And he was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought from the children of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled near Beher Lahai Roi. So Abraham, his life has come to an end. We come to the finality of the story of this man, Abraham, whose life was probably one of the most transformative humans to ever walk the face of the earth. The Torah talks about his life in a very peculiar way. It says he was 100 years, he was 70 years, and he was 5 years. Why not just say he was 175 years? 100 years, 70 years, 5 years. And the rabbis tell us that Abraham's life was the following. He was 175, but his 100 years were like his 70 years. And his 70 years were like his 5 years. That his 5 years, when he was a little toddler, he has no transgressions on his record. Well, that's the way he was when he was 70. And that's the way he was when he was 100. And that's the way he was when he was 175. His whole life was about growth. That doesn't mean he never made mistakes. You see, there's a tremendous difference between someone who is righteous and someone who is perfect. Someone who is righteous does not mean that they don't make mistakes. The rabbis in the Talmud tell us that the definition of a righteous person is one who falls 7 times and gets up. And gets up. It's not the falling that defines a person as a failure. It's the falling and not getting up that defines a person as a failure. Falling is a necessary ingredient in growing. That through our mistakes we learn about ourselves, we learn about life. And it's only if we choose at that moment to grow as a result that's when we become great. Abraham chose his entire life to continuously grow and grow and grow. And anytime he made a mistake, to address that mistake immediately, learn from it, and change as a result of it. I shared this with you before, I'll share it with you again. You see a 5-year-old. 5-year-old, a toddler, laughing, happy, playing, filled with excitement about life. And you come back 10 years later, and that child, sadly, is still a 5-year-old. A 15-year-old teenager, but still at the mental maturity of a 5-year-old. What do you say? It's tragedy, sad. There's something wrong with the child. It's sad. There's some type of mental deficiency. You're not allowed to say handicapped anymore. Some type of mental challenge that's preventing this child from growing. It's a tragedy. Okay. You take a 15-year-old. Healthy, vibrant 15-year-old going through all the challenges and struggles of a teenage adolescent. And you come back 10 years later, and that 25-year-old is still emotionally and mentally a 15-year-old.
I'm not sure.
What do you say?
I'm not sure.
Sad.
Yeah.
But you see that they're never going to get past the 15. It's not just an immaturity. See, the problem is, the analogy, you have to be careful giving this analogy because of the world we live in today. Most 25-year-olds are still acting like they're 15. I don't mean in that case. I don't mean the typical 25-year-old that's running around, especially Los Angeles, that's still acting like they're 15. No, I mean you see that there's something wrong. There's a tragedy here that this child, this person, this adult, this young adult, is never going to grow past 15.
Forrest Gump.
Huh? Forrest Gump. There's something challenging here. It's a tragedy. Gentlemen, 25-year-old, and you come back 10 years later, and you see they've stopped growing at 25. At what point does it no longer be a tragedy? The 35-year-old, you come back 10 years later, they're still 35. The 45-year-old, you come back 10 years later, they're still 45. Do you see when we hear the story and we say the 5-year-old 10 years later, oh, that's a tragedy. Oh, the 15-year-old Forrest Gump 10 years later, that's a tragedy. But at what point do we stop saying it's a tragedy? And let me ask you this. Which is the greater tragedy? The individual who stops growing at 25, 35, 45, or the individual that can't grow at 5? And emotionally, you're probably wanting to say the 5-year-old's the greater tragedy. But the truth is that the other is the greater tragedy. The person who says that they are no longer growing, even if they don't say it consciously, a person who subconsciously, or sadly even more tragically, consciously says, I no longer need to grow, is a greater tragedy than the 5-year-old. Why? Because one has the ability and the faculties by which to grow and is wasting them. Whereas the other has no ability, does not have the faculties by which to grow. Which is a greater tragedy? Wasting a life, or living the life to the best that you possibly can for what you've been given? And I think you'd all agree in that scenario that wasting a life is a greater tragedy. Every single one of us has faculties. We've made it this far. That means you've got the faculties necessary to continue to grow. And just like the majority of people that you're familiar with are still the 25-year-old running around acting like they're 15, but they're doing it almost by choice. Well, guess what? Don't you choose to stop growing and be the 35-year-old just because, continue to grow. Live a life like Abraham. And that's greatness. Because I will give you a definition of greatness. You see, often we envision greatness as something that's so far beyond our reach. When we think of greatness, we think of someone that has achieved a level of success in an arena that is so far beyond our grasp. We think of Jay-Z, the first hip-hop billionaire. Oh, you know what I want to be? I want to be the first, I don't know, orthodox Jew billionaire, but there's already one of those. Don't think of greatness as an individual. Think of greatness as the following. Greatness is the culmination of a continuous series of small steps of growth. That's greatness. A culmination of a continuous series of small steps. Make a decision right now to take one step every day of your life. You know, we all picture this when we talk about financial security. You know, you speak to a financial advisor and they'll tell you, you know, if you just put a little bit away every month, just a little bit away every month, then by the time you're 75 years old, you will have a significant retirement package. If you put starting now, if all of you start now, and you put the amount that if you instead of going out to dinner once a week, whatever it would cost you to go out to dinner once a week, you put that away once a month, in 30 years from now, invested properly, you're sitting on a nice little nest egg. Well, guess what? If it's true financially, then it's true spiritually. One step a day, the rest of your life, you'll be a giant. You'll be an Abraham. with the little time left, I think it would be unjust if I didn't address the holiday that is this weekend. Because the only reason that we have the story of a man like Abraham at our fingertips to look to is because of the holiday that we are celebrating this weekend. When the Jewish people left Egypt, 50 days later, they stood at the bottom of Mount Sinai and heard the Creator of the universe speak. A singular event in human history that has by far been more transformative and impactful on anything else in human history. To hear the Creator of the universe speak. Wisdom, I told you, is understanding life. The only way for wisdom to be real and the only way for wisdom to be meaningful is if it is absolute. If it is from somewhere outside of the realms of human understanding. Because every human, by definition, is biased, and every human has an emotional leaning towards their understanding. And therefore, the only way wisdom can be meaningful and true is if it is from the source of life. And that is what Shavuos is celebrating. Shavuos is celebrating that the Creator of the universe, one time and one time only, let it be known that He's real and that you can understand and that you can live with that wisdom. And that is what Shavuos is all about. And therefore, I highly recommend that each and every one of you take the time over this weekend and figure out a way to celebrate, to connect with Shavuos in some way. I'll give a plug for myself. If anything that I've ever taught you has ever tapped in somewhere where you said, oh, he has what to share, then I can only say with the greatest humility that I can muster up, which is a challenge for me, I'll be honest, that the greatest teaching I ever do is the teaching I do on the Shavuos night. I teach all night from 12:30 to sunrise, and I talk only about what happened at Mount Sinai. It is an unbelievable event. Movies have been made about it. And like I told you, nothing new under the sun. Not movies in terms of, Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. I mean modern movies that have just stolen ideas that are at the very foundation of what happened at Mount Sinai. Narnia is one of them. Back to the Future is another. Just images that what happened at Mount Sinai is beyond human understanding to really grasp what we experienced. But thankfully we have our tradition that tells us what happened. And that's what I share with you that night. So if anyone is... It will be at the Community Shul, which is the former Aisha Torah building. On Doheny and Pico. I don't know what room, so when you get there, just ask, where's Rabbi Denbo?
It's on the corner.
This will be Saturday night. This Saturday night. On the corner of... On the corner of Pico and Doheny, this Saturday night at midnight, half past midnight.
Till what time you go?
Till sunrise.
5 a.m.?
Alright,
Till sunrise. Whatever that is. Yeah,
Okay, I got a question about
please.
Abraham here. You know, he was so strict on Eliezer. Make sure you get a wife from this area. Don't bring anyone else to the family. And then here he goes, marrying women from all over the place, or wherever they were from. And
Whoa, okay, wait. He married one woman. He didn't go... Keturah.
Oh.
He had a bunch of kids, but it was just one woman.
It was Keturah.
Why? Still fine, Keturah. Where was Keturah from?
So, Keturah, it turns out, was a woman that he was already married to. It was the woman that his co-wife, Hagar, that he had married when Sarah couldn't have children. Sarah had told him to take Hagar and to have children with Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. that didn't work out so well, as you recall,
Right.
and so he had to send her away. So he sent her away. The only reason he sent her away is because there was a little bit of a conflict there between Sarah and her.
Oh, I understand.
And now that Sarah's dead, he went and he took her back.
Why did he go to get a girl from the same place Eliezer went to get a girl from his first father?
It's a good question.
And then another question: what did he give to Ishmael? Because it says he gave all those children wisdom, gave Isaac everything, but it doesn't mention what he gave.
Does not give what he, yeah.
Good question. That's very nice.
Good question.
Good question.
Didn't he give him something? Didn't he give him something earlier when he sent
He
him
gave
away?
him
He sent them away. He gave him some stuff when he sent them away, and that was it.
Was there any animosity?
But he gave him, and that was it. He sent them away with
So
stuff.
he had
and
3
that was it.
wives. He had Sarah.
He had, well, no, he had Hagar, Sarah, Hagar,
Yeah.
and then Hagar again. But she has a different name now.
Why?
It's a different name.
She's a teshuva.
The Tshuva.
Was there animosity with the other kids over Isaac since they got another?
I mean, was there? I'm going to have to assume there was. I mean, they're human beings, but that's irrelevant.
Do we know who the descendants are?
Yeah, these names. I mean, we're not going to go into it tonight, but if you look at the names, you can see who they were.
A lot of them are countries in Saudi Arabia. With
Some of
the
them are.
peninsula,
Some of them are. Yeah,
India too.
yeah, and India as well.
Shiva
It's the Far East.
I heard if you go to like an Indian place where the monks are, like they go by levels. Like the biggest level is Avraham.
No, Brahmin.
Huh?
Brahmins.
Brahmin or not Avraham?
No, Brahmin.
Brahmin.
Sent.
Sounds like
It's the exact thing.
Yeah,
It comes from out.
Yeah, sounds like it.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Well,
Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Rabbi.